What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Processing Blue, where you know what we do. We process blue for you. I'm Alex Zietlow, a Carolina Panthers beat reporter for the Charlotte Observer. And y'all, I'm tired, sincerely. And it's not because we stayed up late last night. It's because I once again fell for who these Panthers are against the Atlanta Falcons, when I really should just focus on who they are against everyone else. My goodness. We'll get into that in a second. We'll get into a little bit of that 20-9 loss to the San Francisco 49ers on Monday night and all that encompasses, including a regression from Bryce Young, some confusion from Dave Canales, and the enduring image of the game, Tre'Von Moehrig and Juwan Jennings' entanglement, I guess you could say. We'll also have on writer at The Athletic, Nate Atkins, at the end of the show to preview the Los Angeles Rams game this weekend. So stick around for that. But first, let me introduce my co-host today. It's our indelible columnist, Scott Fowler. He's picking up the mantle with Mike K traveling across the country back to North Carolina today. And Scott, let me start with this. I'm so annoyed at you. How did you know that such a regression was coming from the Panthers? And why didn't you warn the rest of us poor souls?
Well, the key to the Panthers is just pick the opposite of whatever happened the week before. You know, that's generally what's going to happen with them. This team particularly, very Jekyll and Hyde-ish. Just when you think they lose to the Saints, but they can beat the Packers and Dallas, and then this one was sort of predictable though. San Francisco is a very good team. That's a playoff team, I think, and the Panthers just threw in another clunker offensively, and that was the problem. I thought the defense played well enough to win, Alex. That was impressive to pick off Brock Purdy 3 times. And yet to score only 9 points and just to have such a really disastrous offensive showing on prime time was embarrassing, honestly.
Let's talk about how bad this offense was, because I think you can point to a couple things, and sometimes you watch this Panthers offense and you're just like, okay, the defense is doing something well. The Panthers are overmatched talent-wise, perhaps. The wide receivers aren't getting open, whatever. This one was strange, though, because the strength of the Panthers offense all season has been their run game. And yet they only notched 9 runs between the 2 running backs, Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. Rico had 6 carries for 38 yards. Chuba Hubbard had 3 for 16. If you average that out, that's 6 yards per carry, which is quite good in the NFL. On a day when the offense was struggling to move the chains, to stay on the field, when the Panthers are just getting absolutely dominated in time of possession, can you explain this lack of commitment to the run game at all?
No, I thought that was the number one issue, Alex, is stubbornness. Honestly, I thought that Dave Canales and Brad Idzik were just too stubborn. They had convinced themselves before the game that they had matchups they could win on the outside, that they could throw the ball around the park, that San Francisco, who had given up a ton of yards just the week before, I think 57 dropbacks and not a single sack, that they'd be able to have Bryce sit around and find people, much like he did against Atlanta, that they just, they forgot the run game. And there's no excuse for that, because this was a 1-score game up until late in the third quarter. San Francisco was never up by more than 1 possession. And yet, over and over, they're dropping Bryce back on 1st and goal at the 1. They're dropping him back in so many critical situations where Dowdle carries the ball 6 times. It just doesn't make sense when you're trying, as you say, to move the chains and to, get a little momentum. Even after they went for that 2-pointer late, which ultimately didn't matter. I didn't love that, but they weren't going to score enough to win at that point anyway. But even then, on a goal line at the 1-yard play, they tried to throw a very difficult pass to Jalen Coker. They just relied so heavily on a pass game that is simply um, subpar, subpar. Too much throwing, not enough running.
I completely agree, and that 2-point conversion is actually I obviously was watching the game and covering it remotely, and that was the play that for some reason opened the floodgates for all of my friends to text me and be like, "Yo, what's going on?" Truly, and there were so many what's going on moments in this game, uh, particularly at the beginning with all those interceptions. We'll get to that in a second, but it was funny to me that the 2-point conversion was the one that broke the it was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back, so to speak. Let's talk about Bryce Young briefly. And I want to open this up generally. It seems like it's kind of crazy for as volatile as his season has been. It seems like we continue to have the same conversations about him. Um, on Monday night, he finished 18 of 29 for 169 yards and 1 touchdown, added 2 interceptions. Yes, that second interception came thanks to a pretty blatant hold on Teteroa McMillan over the middle of the field. That first one, though, was pretty inexcusable, I would say. Like, yes, you can question the play calling and not running it in on 1st and goal from the 1, but also, like, why are you putting that ball in harm's way to begin with? Um, but Scott, I wanted to kind of tap into your mind as a resource, as a how you say, as a Panthers historian. Have you seen a quarterback with this much volatility week to week? Perhaps, and he doesn't have to be a Panthers quarterback necessarily, but like this just seems uniquely volatile for Bryce Young.
First of all, have I been pronouncing that word incorrectly my whole life? I thought it was volatile. You go
Uh,
with volatile. Okay. All right.
Yo, I don't know. The last time you came on the podcast, you made fun of me for using the word codified, and I was just like, "Yo, I don't know what it means." Okay, I just say things.
No, I love it. I like the way you're expanding your reach. And I don't know if I'm saying it right or not, but let's just say Bryce Young's inconsistency. And I would argue that what we saw, I think you wrote this, Alex, maybe that he kind of just regressed back to the mean. That's not a lot of ups and downs. I mean, he's played 11 games this year. 9 of them he's under 200 yards passing. 9 out of 11. That was just one of those 9. So uh, the weird stuff actually is when he throws for 448 against Atlanta or 328 against Arizona. The weird stuff is not what we saw last night. Unfortunately, that is pretty common. And again, that's why you got to run the ball, because that's where their strength is. And Rico Dowdle, in very limited work, still looked like he could get it done last night against that defense. And they just, they didn't do it. Leggett disappeared again. T-Mac, has 6 drops now, Alex. 6 drops. And that's bad for an entire season. He is in the bottom 20 in the NFL in terms of drops. Not as many as CeeDee Lamb and some other high-profile guys, but still, that's too many drops. I had a key one yesterday. But again, if you're running the ball better and you keep the ball longer and your possession isn't 37 minutes to 22 minutes or whatever it was, Bryce Young's flaws aren't nearly as apparent. This is, again, a huge decision they have to make. They really have to figure out if Bryce is their guy. That decision, I don't think, has been made yet, really, one way or the other. And that's for another time. But in this case, I just think that's what Bryce Young is going to give you. He's probably going to throw for under 200 against the Rams on Sunday, too. The only way you win that game is if you run the ball for probably 200 yards, because Bryce may throw for 150 or 175. You hope he doesn't make the turnovers. And the last thing I'll say is I thought they would lose that game the moment I saw that end zone interception, because San Francisco was better than they were talent-wise overall. That doesn't mean you can't beat them. Just like the Green Bay's better than the Panthers talent-wise. You can still beat them if you play it perfectly. But you have to score there. Bryce Young could have run that ball in, would have been one guy to beat, and I think he would have beat him. And he tried to throw, as you say, put it in harm's way. So that's just where he is. At best, he's going to be a middle-of-the-pack starting NFL quarterback. So you have to work around him with a run game that can be sometimes top 5. And that's where it'll have to change this week.
I couldn't agree with you more. If at the beginning of the season I told you that this Panthers defense was going to keep the Panthers in games and the offense was going to play them out of them, just generally, what would you say?
Say it one more time. I'm still thinking about volatile and volatility and loss.
Yeah, and that probably wasn't the best way to put it. But at the beginning of the season, if I were to pose to you, Scott, hey, this Panthers defense is going to keep the Panthers in games, whereas the offense is going to more often than not be the reason why the Panthers lose.
Yeah.
What did you say?
I would have been very surprised after, last year giving up more points than any team ever, albeit in a 17-game season. But still, last year it was just terrible how often they would give up 30 plus. And this year they have kept them in a lot of games. But as I was just, if you just look at the scoring, the lack of scoring, my goodness, 5 out of the last 6 games, they've scored under 20 points. You got to score 20 or more in the NFL to win games with any consistent, on any consistent basis. So, yeah, I would have been very, very surprised. Kudos to the defense and what they did, 3 picks and keeping them in the game. I thought McCaffrey was good, but not great. I mean, they made him work hard. 31 touches. I mean, they really made the guy work very hard for 142 yards. Had a winning performance overall, I thought. But special teams was not good, Alex. And then the offense was where it really got let down.
Yeah. And one final stat, you brought up a really good point on the scoring, the points throughout the season. A stat that I found compelling: the Panthers have actually won or tied the turnover margin 6 times this year, which is so much better than the year prior. Coming into Monday Night Football, every time they won the turnover battle, they won. So this defense, I know that Bryce Young commands all these headlines, and Rico Dowdle his emergence has just been remarkable, but the defense has really been the engine to their wins, and particularly the takeaways. Now, the defense couldn't do quite enough on Monday, even though they had 3 straight interceptions against the normally really consistent Brock Purdy, which was concerning, and that just is a further indictment on this Panthers offense. But okay, let's talk about the Panthers defense just really briefly, and we're not even going to really talk about the performance because as we said, the defense actually played quite well. J.C. Horn had 2 picks in the first half. Mike Jackson added on another interception in the first half. Only 3 points were made from those 3 turnovers. There were a ton of injuries to this defense, and that a lot of that was a product of being on the field for 37 minutes. Linebacker Claude Charles and cornerback Corey Thornton, 2 backups who were low-key heroes of the Falcons game, got hurt and didn't return on this one. Charles left with a concussion, Thornton with an ankle injury. J.C. Horn finished out the first half, but then went into the locker room and had concussion-like symptoms, and then he was ruled out for the rest of the game, which was a big issue for the secondary. So injuries were a problem. And then there was another problem. At the end of the game, Tre'Von Moehrig, the Panthers' hard-hitting, strong safety, late in the fourth quarter was shown delivering a low blow to 49ers receiver Juwan Jennings. Jennings retaliated at the end of the game with a swipe at Moehrig's face mask. We're recording this Tuesday morning. Fines are likely incoming. A suspension perhaps is even possible. We haven't spoken to Dave Canales yet. We will do that later on Tuesday. But some team or whatever it is, some team or league discipline might be incoming. And Scott, I'm sure when it comes to this whole Tre'Von thing, it's a heat of the moment thing, whatever. But it's still inexcusable, right?
Yeah, it is. You can't do that. And if you do it, you need to do it in the bottom of a pile up, and you don't do it, out in the open with both of you standing where every camera is going to catch it. I'm not naive. I know things go on in pile ups and people get pinched and other bad things happen in there. That's why you want to get out of a pile up really fast as an NFL or college player. But You cannot do that because it puts your team in harm's way because he's an essential part of that defense. He is really part of the reason it's improved because he's physical. And as you mentioned, he's good against the run. He's not a big ball hawking safety, but he's a guy who in the box just helps you a lot. So that's going to be a problem. That was a problem. And then I'm not saying Jennings didn't instigate it because I'm sure he did. I mean, you can kind of see the guy. So, he's previously, I think he got suspended for a full game last year for a different incident. So there's some history there, but you just can't do that. And it really was poor timing for the Panthers on national TV, with people making jokes about, was that what keep pounding really means and keep punching and all that stuff. You don't want that. And so it was a very poor ending to a poor night. And I think this one's going to go on all week, Alex. The initial punishment will probably be appealed and so on. So we may not know Moehrig's status for sure until later in the week. You also mentioned J.C. Horn. That's a big deal, boy. You've got to keep. I hope J.C. Horn is back quickly because to me, he's the defensive MVP this year. He and Derek Brown. And you don't want to lose Horn for even a game because that changes so much.
I mean, to your point, if you put together these guys' statistical outputs so far this season, Tre'Von and JC were playing at a Pro Bowl level. Tre'Von, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but was close to the league lead in tackles for loss. JC Horn now shares the league lead in interceptions with 5. So, yeah, two rough situations going on there in the Panthers' secondary. All right, let's close out real quick. Well, we got 2 more questions for you, but Scott, let's just end on some sort of positive note. Dave Canales concluded his post-game press conference with the quote, "Everything is still in front of us." And technically it's true when you're talking about this playoff picture. The Panthers are still a half game back from the Tampa Bay Bucks in the NFC North. Tampa Bay is 6-5, Carolina 6-6. The Falcons are 4-7, and the Saints are 2-9. They did squander a real great opportunity to have sole possession of NFC, but they still control their own destiny. I said coming into Monday Night Football that the Panthers were going to have to win 3 of their next 6 to have a legitimate shot at the crown. I think now it's just 3 of the next 5. But the next 5 are just brutal. You got the Los Angeles Rams, you got a bye, you got the Saints, and then you got Tampa Bay, Seattle, and then the Bucks again. Scott, what do you make of this playoff picture?
Well, it's true that they're all it's all in front of them, but I think maybe 3 out of 5 will get it done, Alex, but 2 of the 3 probably have to be against Tampa Bay. You have to beat them down enough that you can get there, and then maybe 9 and 8 might get it done. But the Tampa Bay games are the real key there. It is a brutal end to the season here because the Rams and Seattle are both very good. The one game you'd think they'd win would be New Orleans, who they already somehow lost to. That is the loss that will haunt them at the end of the year. You cannot lose to a 2-9 Saints team at home playing a rookie quarterback. But anyway, it happened. So they're in the playoff hunt. We should say exactly what you said. I think the wild card is done. They have no shot at a wild card, in my opinion. The wild card is over. What they have to do, it's not mathematically over, but in reality, it's over. But the NFC South is very much in play. They're only a half game out. Tampa Bay has Baker Mayfield's got an injury now, a non-throwing shoulder injury. He may miss this week. If Teddy Bridgewater's playing now, Teddy Bridgewater, we saw him here, and even at his best, he's not very good. So Teddy Bridgewater, that probably gives the Panthers a little bit more runway, but they got to right the ship in a hurry.
Yep, I completely agree. Just for those listening at home, they are fighting for a wild card spot with the Seahawks, who are 8-3, the Packers, who are 7-3-1, and the 49ers, who are 8-4, and the Detroit Lions, who are 7-4, and just looked really explosive this past weekend. So I think Scott's right. I think the path to the playoffs is through the NFC South. All right, Scott. So you just tell me what's going to happen because you are really good at this week-to-week prediction thing. We're going to preview the Rams game in a few minutes with Nate Atkins, like I said at the top of the show. But I want to get your prediction first. Should I just say my prediction and then you can tell the world what's actually going to happen?
Doesn't matter. I wouldn't mention your record in predictions though.
I,
Whatever, it just
I ain't going to do that. I am not going to do that. I am like the Panthers, did not squander my opportunity to become sole possession of last place among the trio of predictors at the Charlotte Observer. All right, so I'm just going to say that the Rams win. If I have to do a score, I'll do 33-20, something like that. I think that these Rams are one of the best teams in the NFL. I think Matt Stafford has a legitimate shot at his first most valuable player award. I don't see a path to victory here. What about you, Scott?
I would agree. I'm picking the Rams 27-13. I think the problem here again will be that Carolina is going to have a lot of trouble scoring, and then the defense will play okay. But as you say, they are just they are very strong. I think really, to me, the Rams are maybe the best team in the NFL at the moment. I think I would favor them to make the Super Bowl out of the NFC. And so this is a very difficult game. Only shot. You get Rico Dowdle to 100 plus in this game. He touches the ball 20 times. Chuba has a big game, and they just keep it away from Stafford. The crazy stat about Stafford, I think, is right, is that he's thrown 27 touchdown passes since his last interception. That's just a nutty stat. He's playing at such a high level. So you just got to – the possession almost would have to be changed from the game we just saw flip-flopped into where the Panthers have to hold the ball 35 minutes or something to win this game. But I do not think they will. I think they'll enter the bye week at 6-7 and lose to the Rams Sunday.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Scott. Now on to my conversation with The Athletic's Nate Atkins. All right, I'm here with Nate Atkins, who covers the Los Angeles Rams for The Athletic, and we're just so honored to have him here. He's one of the best sports writers in the country, honestly, with too many national and state awards to list off here. But Nate, I'm gonna hit you with the hardest hitting question at first. It's your first season on the West Coast. Previously, you were with the Indianapolis Colts for the Indy Star. I mean, were you the person holding the Colts back? Geez, you leave and all of a sudden they're one of the best teams in the league. What's going on?
It's funny because people on the Colts beat already were making those jokes when I was there because I showed up. They'd made the playoffs the year before and 2 years before that, and then they were like 9-6 when I got there and around mid-season. They fall apart, and then they missed the playoffs for 4 straight years. And so they were already saying that, but at the time I left, it still felt like they were just going to flounder. And then here they are, fighting for the number 1 seed. So in some ways it feels like that, but then, that if that's the curse that I bring, it didn't follow me out here to LA. So I don't know, maybe that's a specific thing in the Midwest, because I did cover 3 Midwestern teams and only saw 1 playoff game between all of them. So I think I'll already see at least as many playoff games this year as I had seen before this. So it's been an interesting shift.
Yeah, and we're all better for the fact that this curse, whatever you want to call it, didn't follow you into LA, because you're doing really great stuff out there. Obviously, the Panthers and the Rams are heading into a Week 13 matchup. I want to preview the Rams in finer detail, but first, let's just deal in generalities. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. In your opinion, are the Rams legitimate Super Bowl contenders this year?
Yeah, they really are. The thing about them is I think that what starts to make you a contender for in a very basic level is like, do you have the dude at quarterback? And Matthew Stafford right now looks like that and then some. So you've got a track record where he's taken them to a Super Bowl back in 2021. And last year, they really came as close as anybody to beating the Eagles. They lost close when he had a potential game-winning drive in Philly, and then the Eagles rolled everyone else that postseason. And so it was coming into the year, as long as he was healthy, you felt like that was going to be the case. And then he had this back injury in training camp. And so you're wondering, like, how much does he have left? And it turned out that the absence of the back injury was just getting him ready for an outrageous run that he's been on, where it took a few weeks after missing that time and not in Davante Adams being new to really get going. But he was pretty efficient to start the year. And then he's just gotten on a crazy roll where now he's thrown 27 touchdown passes since his last interception. And some of the records he's putting up are just incredible. He's the first quarterback in the history of the game to throw 4 touchdowns and no picks in 3 straight games. And he's one of 4 ever to start a season with 30 touchdowns and fewer than 5 picks. And so it starts with him, but it's the impressive thing over the past 6 weeks or so has been how much the rest of the team has grown around him, where a defense that is the lowest paid in the NFL is top 10 in most categories, and right now is just taking the ball away at a crazy rate. And they've got their offensive line settled, and whenever Stafford has time, he's really effective, and he's sort of Davante Adams and Puka Nacua, and Adams is all of a sudden leading the league in touchdowns, so he looks like kind of the more vintage Davante Adams that we've seen before. And, you know, they used to get killed by their special teams. That has not been the case the past few weeks. And so right now they're just on a roll. They won 6 straight games by an average of 20 points. And so they're number 1 in the league in point differential, and they've beaten the teams ranked number 2 and number 3. So especially if they can get a nice path in the playoffs, if they can get that number 1 seed and avoid going to Philly, I think that's going to be their best route, because the trips to Philly have been the ones that have tripped them up. Week 2 this year and their season last year. This team doesn't want to get out in the frigid cold weather and environment like that. But if they can get the path to play that game at SoFi Stadium, you know, I think they're going to go into the postseason as the favorites. And right now, like, we have a playoff simulator, and they have I think it's a 57% chance of getting the number 1 seed and the odds-on favorites to win the Super Bowl as of right now. So, still some time to go, but as of right now, they definitely look like a team that one of the few teams that's like favored to have that chance.
That is so well said. And honestly, several of those stats were mind blowing. I wanted to drill down on the whole on the Stafford of it all. 37 years old. That's a year younger than Andy Dalton, Panthers fans. He's got a little gray in his beard, but somehow he's having arguably his best season of his career statistically. I just checked FanDuel right before hopping on this call. He's minus 220 to win the MVP this year. So he's like by far the favorite. You have covered Matthew Stafford previously in a previous life. Firstly, how did this happen? And secondly, did you predict this to happen? Because I'm not sure others did.
You know, when I first took this job and he was not playing at all in training camp, and there were these different setbacks and talk about a degenerative back issue, and he's 37, and they had just spent an offseason kind of letting him at least look around for a new destination. You did have to wonder, like, all quarterbacks at some point, you know, Father Time's going to win. And I saw that with Matt Ryan in Indianapolis. There's just a certain point where they take a hit, where they lose enough arm strength, and it just isn't the same. So I had to get out there and really see it. And I'm not kidding, though. When I saw his very first practice, I was like, this is the dude I saw in Detroit. Except now he's better than that, because it's all that experience that's added up over 17 seasons. His mind has always worked at a crazy high level. But like when I got there in Detroit, he was right in the middle of his career. He had just started to take a lot of the job at a higher level. Like he kind of rode a lot of talent early on in his career and had to just get through injuries and then put up crazy numbers with Calvin Johnson. But when I got there in Detroit in 2016 is when he was working with a private throwing coach and working on layering the ball and different speeds of the ball and transitioning much of his game pre-snap. And so that was the start of what we're seeing now, where he's got 17 years of experience on a lot of the players that he's going up against. and he's just moving at a faster clip. He just seems to know what's going to open before it opens and motioning guys and audibly to create those mismatches. And then the players that he's playing with are Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua to lead that off. And it's just sort of the marriage of Stafford and McVay has kind of reached its pinnacle. You know, he came in and had a great season his first year. They won the Super Bowl. He had 41 touchdowns, but that was still Aaron Donald's team, and they had Jalen Ramsey and they had Von Miller. Like, this is a team that Stafford is the one engineering, and he's doing it because he still has most of that arm strength that made him the number one pick, on top of all the craftiness of the no-look passes and the arm angles he'll do. But the thing that's new and different that he's never done before is to be able to put up these numbers and not turn the ball over. Now, he was a classic gunslinger. We used to joke that he was the best in Detroit. He was the best at leading a comeback from his own pick six, because in the middle of the games, he just would be on a heater and he would try something that's way too risky and it would get taken to the house, and then he would dial it back. Now he's playing in this sort of mix of super confident but also super safe. There just aren't risky throws out there that I can't think of a dropped pick in that entire span where he's thrown 25 touchdowns and no picks. And so he's just on a different level, and it's also credit to everybody around him. I just think Sean McVay has built a pretty perfect system where they have good enough protection, and they have a great pass protecting running back in Kyron Williams. And when you have Stafford really protected, that was the best version of Detroit. That's the best now. But it's also probably the best 1-2 punch of wide receivers that he's ever had, where he's had years where Calvin Johnson or Cooper Kupp put up monster numbers, but it was sort of like a one guy carrying the passing game. Now you have Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams really balancing each other really well, where Puka Nacua is this high volume guy who kills zone defenses, and he'll get you into the red zone. Then Devontae is the one finishing it, already with 12 touchdowns and pretty much unguardable on some of these fade and slant routes at the goal line. And so I don't think anybody saw a 30 touchdown, 2 interception season from Stafford, because that level of ball security has just never been there for him. But it also makes sense when you add up the fact that all the physical tools are still there for him, but he's got all this experience and edge on everybody else, and a coach and a system that fits him pretty perfectly. So for right now, it's going about as well as you could have ever imagined.
Yeah, that's exactly right. About as well as you could have ever imagined. It's true. I have a lot of family in Michigan. A lot of them were tragic Detroit Lions fans prior to the Dan Campbell years, and they believed in Matt Stafford, but they just, like you said, he was coming back from his own mistakes oftentimes, and what he's doing is truly special. We haven't talked much about the Los Angeles Rams' run game, however, and I wanted to pick your brain about this. The Panthers actually are pretty decent at stopping the run. At least they have been much improved from the 2024 misery that it was. So that's the good news. The bad news is that they're kind of beat up right now. It's unclear if their starting inside linebackers will be healthy for Week 13. Both starters, Christian Roseboom and Trevin Wallace, didn't play on Monday night. And then their reliable reserve inside linebacker, Claudin Chairless, also got hurt. He's out with a concussion. So if there is a shortcoming to this Rams offense, is it their rush offense? Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of crazy to say that because Kyron Williams is like this really talented back. So is that a shortcoming of this offense? And do you think that Sean McVay will try to scheme something up to get that part of the offense on track against this weakened Panthers defense?
You know, I think this run game for the Rams it's just the complementary unit to a passing game that's on fire right now. But I think it's really solid when they've needed to go to it. They're pretty smart about not running in situations that are at a disadvantage for them. So there will be certain games where they just throw so much more than run, like what just happened against the Buccaneers, is because teams want to stack the box and take that away. But they've started to get more explosive in the run game as the season's gone on. Blake Corum isn't the most he's still a young runner learning some things, but he can really hit a hole and explode. Kyron Williams is adding a little bit more with breaking tackles and some of the vision he's added to his game. So I think it's a very solid run game. It's not the type that's they're not gonna bust off a lot of 50-yard runs on people, but they are really good at getting to that 10 to 20-yard run when they want to. And they've had some of their own weaknesses or losses too, on due to injuries. At right tackle, Rob Havenstein's on injured reserve, and the backup Warren McClendon's been very good in pass pro, but he's still developing as a run blocker and in their zone scheme. So it's not as potent as it was a few weeks ago when Havenstein was out there. But it is, I still think it's pretty functional and pretty good. And it's one of those where they go to it more when teams start really trying to take that passing game away and they play really deep. That's when they'll go to the run game more. So it's just one of those, it kind of ebbs and flows. But I mean, Kyron Williams is at 4.7 yards a carry this season on pretty good volume. So, I think they're pretty happy with what they got there.
Yeah. Want to talk about the defense real quick. You wrote a really awesome story about Byron Young, the Rams pass rusher, who not all that long ago was spending his Friday nights as a manager at a Dollar General. And now he's become one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. I would just, firstly, I know that you're a modest guy, so I don't want to put you in a position where you have to talk about that story specifically, but if you could tell the story of Byron Young, just very briefly, that would be wonderful. And then how he has helped this defense become what it is.
Yeah, well, I always appreciate your kind words. And that was a fun story to tell on Byron, who, it was 6 years ago. He was an assistant manager at Dollar General, 2 years removed from football. Not a single college in America seemed to want him, to the point where he had to go to a walk-on tryout at Georgia Military, where they had a combine of about 150 kids, but they saw the athleticism in this guy that ended up running a 4.40 at the NFL Combine as a defensive end. And that started everything. And Byron he is truly one of those players that loves this game, like, to his core. I think it's kind of the only thing that he's into. Like, he was at Georgia Military and did nothing but the classes in the football. It was just sort of like that to him was his ticket out of a very small town for a kid from a family of 13 siblings. And that was his only way really to be able to make college a reality at that time in his life. And what's cool is he's been able to carry that sort of humility and hunger even to this level where he's at the NFL. And, he hasn't gotten paid yet, but he's certainly on the track to do that with what he's doing as a pass rusher. But he really does seem like he's the same guy it's always been. And so that's a big part of what has transformed the Rams as a defense, because for a couple of years now, they've been trying to figure out how the heck do you move on from losing an Aaron Donald. And instead, what they've done is mostly recreate the impact in the aggregate across the entire line, where Jared Verse is that, number one edge rusher who's not Aaron Donald, because nobody is, but he is elite against the run and pretty good as a pass rusher. You got him as a power rusher on one side. You've got Byron Young, this 4.4 speed guy on the other side, who just chases down quarterbacks when the pocket collapses. And then they have some interior guys with Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk, and they'll occasionally blitz a safety. So the pass rush has really just engineered this thing. It's the one way that they were able to build a defense with the lowest salary of any unit and be a top 10 unit like they are, because they're just that difficult and confusing up front. They win the matchups one-on-one, but they also confuse a lot, where they mix between 4-man fronts and 5-man fronts, and they'll flip the sides that Young and Verse are on, or they'll overload one of those sides with both of them, and bring in some other guys, to rush the passer. They'll have 6 DBs, and they just do a lot of creative and interesting things. And Byron Young is at the forefront of that, because he's the fastest player on that front. And he's the guy that everyone's trying to, everyone puts their attention to Jared Verse, and Byron's winning those one-on-one matchups for the most part. I will say that there has been a bit of a shift the past month or so, once people realize, like, you got to pay attention to Byron Young. He's really wrecking a lot of these games, that he hasn't been as productive the past few. He's had some good rushes, but he's not he's not really getting those strip sacks, and that's what he wants to get back to, is find a way to win now that you're getting that attention. A guy that 6 years ago was at Dollar General and couldn't get a tryout anywhere is now getting the attention from these top end NFL offenses, and so that's a little bit of the transition for this player who is still only in his third season, even though he's 27 years old, because of that long wait to get started. So I'm curious to see over those final 6 games, what the next evolution for him is, where he's talked about he's got to get really consistent and be that guy every week and not just when the matchups are right. And so, that's what we'll see if he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I have heard that the Rams are Super Bowl contenders, that they have this wonderfully motivated star on defense that is impacting the entire front. They have probably the MVP at quarterback, a really complimentary offense, one of the brightest minds in Sean McVay as head coach. Nate, is there any path to a Panthers victory? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, no, I didn't plan on coming on here and just being like a Rams homer. That's just, you caught me at the edge of a 6-game winning streak. And so
No, I'm absolutely.
I love it. It's a little hard to, it's just hard. It is hard to poke holes in this team, because really in the season, when they would win, you could still go with the fact that they had probably the worst field goal unit you'll ever see in your life through the first 2 months. I mean, it was every play would either be a bad snap, a missed protection, or a missed kick. And so that was the path for teams. And I still think it can be, because they've only tried 2 field goals the past 2 weeks since they switched kickers from Josh Carty to Harrison Mevis. They saw a little bit of pressure against the Bucs. It just didn't affect Mevis on those kicks. But that's what I would try for the Panthers, is block a field goal, or at least affect them in the rush. And first of all, you have to force them to kick field goals. That's been very hard right now with what they're doing in the red zone. But the Seahawks were able to do it. They were able to actually slow the passing game down, because they just confused so much in the coverage on the back end that it threw Devontae Adams and Matthew Stafford's timing off just enough. And that's the thing, is Adams could be a little boomer bust right now, where he's put up a ton of touchdowns, but he has had some drops too. And so I think if you could throw those two off just enough before they get inside the 5-yard line, force them to kick field goals, you're either limiting them to 3, or you can end up getting explosive play if you can get a block. I still think that's out there. And then the other way is the fact that the Rams just lost Quentin Lake from their defense, and he was this defensive back and captain who plays nickel, corner, strong safety, and free safety, and just switches interchangeably, communicates the defense. And that wasn't an issue this past week. They handled that tremendously against Baker Mayfield. But for as much as guys talk about how important he is and how there is no replacement for the type of stuff he's doing, I think that's going to take a toll at some point. And so that's going to be on Dave Canales and Bryce Young to pick that apart. And if Bryce can play one of his better games and take advantage of young and newer players in the secondary rotating around, I think they've got a shot. The problem is the 2 outside corners the Rams have, Kobe Durant and Emmanuel Forbes, are playing as well as anybody, just making so many plays on the ball. So it's more of a throw across the middle of the field. But you will see the Rams lack. Their linebackers are not very good in coverage, and they're down their top safety. So if they can, when you can target slot receivers and tight ends across the middle of the field, or running backs, that's when teams have kind of broken through. With guys like Christian McCaffrey, for example, went for 90 yards against them one game. So Kyle Shanahan always seems to get some kind of play action matchup on a linebacker who just doesn't have it. And so if Dave Canales can really put a good plan together with play action, attacking the middle of the field, and Bryce Young can avoid throwing interceptions to those outside cornerbacks, I think there's something to gain there. And just the fact that the Rams, they're on this hot streak, and they played 2 straight really big games between, the Seahawks was the division lead, and then Sunday Night Football against the Buccaneers with their old quarterback Baker Mayfield coming back. So this could be like a letdown opportunity, where now they got to go on the road, long trip to the East Coast. I will say Sean McVay's been incredible in those games if you look at them. Most West Coast teams are not good in that slot. He's actually been really, really good in that slot. We saw him go to Baltimore and earlier this year, and Philly, they lost that game, but they were up 26-7. So they have actually handled those early starts pretty well, but still it's a letdown spot for a team that's rolling and coming off 2 big games. And so if the Panthers can make a play on special teams, and if they can attack the middle of the field on defense, I think they can be in this game for sure.
Awesome. Well, Nate, this was really great. Thank you so much for your time, man. And I look forward to hanging out with you in Charlotte when you make the trip back to the East Coast. Really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, and that will do it for us this week. Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike K. in absentia, Scott Fowler, and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all of your Panthers needs. Scott, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.